Excuse me, ma'am, there seems to be a mistake. We need you to move so our VIP passenger can be accommodated, the flight attendant said, her tone polite but laced with condescension. This seat is reserved for gold members only. You don't belong here. Behind her stood Clarissa Bellamy, a 55-year-old white woman dressed head to toe in Chanel, arms crossed, her gaze fixed with irritation on the black woman occupying seat 1A. She tapped her designer heels impatiently, clearly expecting Arielle Monroe to move without question. But Arielle didn't flinch. She looked up, calm and composed, as if the insult barely registered. What no one on that flight knew was that Arielle wasn't just a gold member. She was the CEO of Monarch Air, the very airline operating this flight. And in just 5 minutes, the crew's arrogance would cost them everything. Arielle Monroe, 38, was no ordinary traveler. As the CEO of Monarch Air, a luxury airline headquartered in Denver, she was widely respected in the aviation industry for her sharp instincts, quiet strength, and the visionary reforms that pulled the company back from collapse during the post-pandemic downturn. Her leadership wasn't built on headlines or self-promotion, but on quiet, relentless execution, revamping training programs, improving employee benefits, and pioneering inclusive policies that had won Monarch a reputation as the future of air travel. Yet on that particular Thursday morning, Arielle didn't board Flight 227 from Miami to Seattle as a CEO, a guest speaker, or a headline maker. She boarded simply as a passenger, no assistance, no entourage, no mention of her title. She had booked seat 1A in the airline's elite Skylux cabin, where each ticket cost nearly $8,000, offering lie-flat beds, personal concierge service, and the kind of privacy reserved for high-powered executives and celebrities. But she hadn't chosen this seat for luxury. She chose it for the legroom, space she needed to review her keynote presentation for the upcoming Global Aviation Leadership Summit in Seattle. Arielle believed deeply that leaders should experience their services the way real customers do. That was the entire point of traveling incognito, to see what others see, to feel what they feel. As the flight boarded, she greeted the crew with a smile, thanked the cleaning staff, and quietly took her seat, blending in by design. Her wardrobe was elegant but understated, a charcoal grey suit, leather-bound planner in hand, and a calm that made her seem unremarkable to the untrained eye. She had done this before, dozens of times in different cities under different names. It was how she stayed connected to the heart of the company she built. But that morning, something was different. Moments after she settled in, a flight attendant approached, eyes darting between Arielle and the woman hovering just behind her. The tension was subtle at first, almost imperceptible. The kind of coded interaction most people learn to recognize only after experiencing it one too many times. The flight attendant's smile was tight, her words scripted, her posture practiced. Still, Arielle didn't expect what followed. The request to move was framed politely, almost like a favor. But the implication was unmistakable. This seat, her seat, was not meant for someone who looked like her. The woman behind the attendant, Clarissa Bellamy, practically rolled her eyes as if the entire situation was beneath her. She made a show of checking her watch and sighing audibly, clearly expecting compliance. What neither Clarissa nor the crew knew was that their assumptions were about to become very public and very costly. Because in trying to remove the problem from seat 1A, they had just triggered a chain of events that would shake the company from top to bottom. Chief Flight Attendant Chelsea approached Arielle with a practiced smile and a thinly veiled request. Would she mind relocating to another seat so that a preferred guest could sit in 1A? The phrase preferred guest was code, of course. Everyone in the Skylux cabin was technically elite, but Chelsea made it clear this wasn't about status. It was about familiarity. Clarissa Bellamy, standing just behind her in an expensive silk blouse and gold-studded heels, was a frequent flyer on the Miami-Seattle route and had grown accustomed to her usual seat. Arielle responded calmly, showing both her gold member card and her boarding pass, both clearly confirming seat 1A. "This is my assigned seat," she said plainly, leaving no room for ambiguity. But Chelsea's smile faltered, replaced by the tightness of someone who had already decided this conversation would end one way or another. Clarissa let out an exaggerated sigh, muttering just loud enough for others to hear, "Some people don't know where they belong." Must have booked the wrong class. The words hung in the air like smoke, ugly, toxic, and impossible to ignore. Arielle's composure never wavered, but her refusal to move set off a quiet storm. Chelsea leaned toward the cockpit and whispered something to Captain Marvin Gray. Within minutes, airport security had been summoned. Passengers began to glance up from their pre-flight routines, sensing something unusual was unfolding. A man in seat 2C discreetly turned on his phone camera and began to record as Chelsea walked past him. What he captured would later go viral. Clarissa, slipping a white envelope into Chelsea's jacket pocket as she whispered, "Thank you for handling this quietly." The camera caught everything: the money, the expression, the complicity. Moments later, two uniformed officers arrived at Arielle's row. Chelsea stepped aside as they calmly informed her she would need to vacate the seat. "We've been asked to remove you due to a seating conflict," one of them said. Arielle asked what policy she had violated. They didn't answer. As she stood, gathering her belongings with quiet dignity, a few passengers looked away. Others watched with casual indifference. One even smirked. Clarissa slid into the now vacated seat with a satisfied sigh, as if justice had been served. No one knew that the woman they had just humiliated, the one they assumed didn't belong, was the CEO of the airline. Arielle said nothing as she walked down the aisle, escorted by security, her planner clutched to her side. But behind her calm demeanor, a storm had begun to gather. Within minutes, she would be in a private office inside the airport. And within the hour, careers would be over. Because while others saw a disposable passenger, they had just crossed the only person on the plane with the authority to fire them all. 5 minutes after being removed from the flight, Arielle Monroe entered the Executive Operations Suite located inside Miami International Airport, an inconspicuous office near Gate C-14, used by Monarch Air's tech and logistics team for high-level troubleshooting. She didn't pause to process what had just happened. Instead, she opened her laptop, her fingers moving swiftly as she dialed Jamal Lewis, the company's chief operating officer. "Code Black," she said calmly, referencing an internal protocol reserved for crises with potential brand-damaging impact. Within seconds, alerts went out to Monarch's heads of legal, HR, and corporate communications. A secure Zoom link was launched, and by the time Arielle shared her screen, the now viral video of her removal had already surpassed 500,000 views. The footage, captured by a passenger across the aisle, was damning. It showed Chelsea smiling as Clarissa discreetly tucked an envelope into her jacket. Moments later, Captain Marvin Gray appeared on screen, deliberately ignoring Arielle's calm questions and invoking vague language about disruptions while refusing to cite any specific policy. And then came Clarissa's unmistakable voice, "Not everyone deserves a seat up here. Let her go back where she came from." The words were clear, entitled, and chilling. By the time the video was clipped, shared, and reposted by multiple accounts on TikTok and Twitter, it had accumulated over 1 million views. The hashtag #Monarch discrimination was trending in 5 major cities. Influencers, public figures, and airline watchdogs began weighing in. Some had no idea the woman being escorted off the plane was a CEO. Others who recognized her quickly pieced together the implications. This wasn't just a racial incident, it was corporate hypocrisy playing out in full view of the public. Arielle remained composed as her team reported in. A surge in press inquiries, internal Slack channels erupting with concern, and a stock monitoring tool flagging increased chatter among shareholders. The PR director recommended issuing a holding statement, but Arielle cut in firmly, "No press release. We act first." Meanwhile, calls started coming in from board members, some panicked, some posturing, all demanding answers, but Arielle wasn't waiting for consensus. She pulled up Monarch's employee code of ethics, highlighted the zero-tolerance clause for bribery and bias, and began preparing dismissal notices. Legal was tasked with reviewing the footage frame by frame. Human Resources began collecting past performance reports on Chelsea and Captain Gray. Communications drafted an internal memo, not for the public, but for Monarch employees, reminding them who the company claimed to be and the standards expected of its leaders. Arielle didn't flinch. She had built Monarch Air on a foundation of accountability and inclusion, and if it had begun to rot from the inside, it was her duty to excise the decay. The fallout was already spiraling beyond the terminal. Her job now wasn't just to restore public trust, it was to prove that Monarch's commitment to fairness wasn't just marketing. And in less than an hour, she'd begin by holding her own people accountable, starting with the ones who thought she didn't belong in her own seat. Inside the executive boardroom of Monarch Air's Denver headquarters, a palpable silence fell as Arielle Monroe stood at the head of the long mahogany table, flanked by members of her executive team. The lights dimmed as she tapped her laptop and projected the video footage that had ignited a firestorm across the country. Frame by frame, the room watched as Chelsea accepted the bribe, as Captain Marvin Gray ignored standard operating procedures, and as Clarissa Bellamy's privileged disdain dripped from every word. No one spoke. No one moved. When the video ended, Arielle looked each board member in the eye and spoke with unmistakable clarity. This wasn't a lapse in judgment. It was the byproduct of a system that protects familiarity over fairness and comfort over courage. Her voice remained calm, but the weight of what she said landed like a gavel. If we claim to be a modern airline, diverse, inclusive, and equitable, then our actions must match our branding. With that, she pulled out 3 manila envelopes and placed them on the table. Inside were termination letters, signed, dated, and final. One for Chelsea, one for Captain Gray, and one for the onboard service supervisor who had enabled the situation without question. Effective immediately, she said. The board remained silent, some stunned by the decisiveness, others quietly nodding in agreement. Arielle didn't pause for reaction. She wasn't finished. She then unveiled what she called Operation Phoenix, a company-wide top-down initiative to not only clean house but rebuild the foundation of Monarch's service culture from the inside out. The first step, a full 36-hour grounding of all Monarch Air flights, an unprecedented move that would cost the company millions in short-term losses but send a powerful message about values over revenue. Every flight, every route, every team will be paused, she declared, because this isn't just a PR issue. It's a cultural reckoning. Second, she introduced an anonymous internal audit system, allowing employees to report discriminatory behavior, misconduct, or favoritism without fear of retaliation. These reports would be reviewed by an independent ethics board Arielle personally selected from outside the company. Finally, she implemented a permanent ban on all forms of customer prioritization based on appearance, status familiarity, or regular passenger relationships. Service should be based on standards, not skin tone or surname, she said. Within hours, the news hit every major outlet. Arielle declined all interview requests. She didn't sit for sound bites or press conferences. Her statement had already been made in the form of direct action. Passengers applauded the changes. Advocacy groups publicly commended Monarch Air for being the first major U.S. airline to voluntarily suspend operations in the name of internal accountability. Former skeptics now hailed Arielle as a no-nonsense reformer who walked her talk. And as the stock price temporarily dipped, it quickly rebounded on investor confidence in a stronger, more ethical brand. For Arielle, it wasn't about optics. It was about integrity. The injustice she experienced wasn't an isolated event. It was a mirror held up to a broader problem. And instead of dodging blame, she chose to lead through fire. Monarch didn't just survive the storm, it burned away what no longer served and began again. In the weeks that followed, the ripple effects of Arielle Monroe's swift and decisive actions were felt across industries far beyond aviation. Clarissa Bellamy, once a respected figure in Florida's high-end real estate market, found herself facing a different kind of turbulence. Monarch Air issued a lifetime ban on her travel, citing violation of their newly revised passenger conduct policy. But the consequences didn't stop there. Video of her entitled behavior, and especially the line, "Not everyone deserves a seat up here," circulated rapidly, earning her the viral nickname First Class Karen. Her personal and business social media accounts were flooded with backlash. Clients began pulling out of pending property deals, unwilling to be associated with someone now emblematic of elite racism and unchecked privilege. Her company issued a vague statement distancing itself from her, and within a month, Clarissa had stepped down from the executive team amid mounting pressure. For Chelsea and Captain Gray, the professional fallout was equally swift. Both attempted to apply for positions at regional airlines and private charters, but the phrase involvement in the Monarch incident was enough to end conversations before they began. Hiring managers didn't want the public relations baggage, nor the liability. Their once solid careers, built over years of safe flights and customer service, were now defined by a few minutes of poor judgment caught on camera. Recruiters stopped calling, references dried up. Their reputations were no longer theirs to control. And yet, Arielle wasn't interested in public shaming or career-ending vengeance. While the world dissected the viral video and applauded her leadership, she remained focused on what mattered most: building a safer, more just system, not just at Monarch, but across the industry. She launched the Justice Mile Foundation, a non-profit initiative designed to offer financial, emotional, and legal support to air passengers who had experienced discrimination, profiling, or unjust treatment during travel. The foundation partnered with civil rights attorneys, trauma counselors, and policy advocates to create a support network for victims who often lacked the resources to fight back. "The seat I lost," Arielle said at the foundation's launch event, "gave me the opportunity to reclaim something far more important: dignity for people who are told, directly or indirectly, that they don't belong." Monarch Air pledged $10 million in initial funding, and several Fortune 500 partners quietly followed with matching grants. Justice Mile became more than just a response to a single injustice. It evolved into a platform for widespread reform. Meanwhile, Monarch's internal metrics reflected the cultural shift. Customer satisfaction rose by double digits, particularly among Black, Hispanic, and Middle Eastern travelers. Staff morale improved. Incidents of complaints related to profiling dropped sharply. Arielle had not only regained her seat, she redefined who that seat was truly for. And though Clarissa, Chelsea, and Gray faded into anonymity, their mistakes lit the path for a better future. For Arielle, the goal had never been personal redemption. It had been about systemic change, and ensuring that what happened to her would never happen, unseen and unchallenged, to someone without the power to fight back. 3 months later, Arielle Monroe stood before a packed auditorium at the Global Aviation Innovation Summit in Geneva. The stage lights framed her in quiet confidence, yet there was no mention of the viral incident, no rehashing of headlines or personal vindication. She didn't need to revisit what the world had already seen. Instead, she delivered a single powerful message. Sometimes you have to be removed from the very seat you helped build to realize the system you trusted wasn't built for everyone, and that the work you do next isn't for you. It's for those who don't have the power to speak up or be heard. The audience fell into a contemplative silence, not out of politeness, but because every word landed with intention. Arielle wasn't just a CEO anymore. She had become a symbol of what accountability, humility, and transformation looked like when lived out in full view. Her leadership in the wake of the Monarch Air incident was now being studied in business schools and crisis management programs across the country. But for Arielle, the true legacy wasn't measured in media coverage or applause. It was measured in the number of passengers who now felt safe boarding a plane. It was found in the frontline staff who had learned not just customer service skills, but the values of dignity and respect. The systemic changes she initiated became a model for other industries, grappling with their own internal biases. And the Justice Mile Foundation continued to expand, launching advocacy programs in train stations, hotels, and other public transportation hubs. Arielle's fight had started in one seat on one plane, but its reach had become borderless. What her story revealed above all was this: discrimination rarely announces itself in bold letters. It hides in policies that seem neutral, in traditions that reward familiarity over fairness, and in cultures where silence is safer than standing up. The harm doesn't always come from slurs. It comes from the subtle permissions people grant themselves to ignore others' humanity. And resisting that kind of harm doesn't always look like shouting. Sometimes resistance is calm. It's measured. It's sitting still in your rightful place when everything around you tells you to move. Arielle's journey is a reminder that true strength isn't loud. It doesn't come from reacting with rage, but from responding with purpose. Her story teaches us that when you're in a position to fix what's broken, you don't wait for approval, and you don't apologize for acting. You rebuild the system, brick by brick, policy by policy, so that no one else has to fight the same fight alone. And most importantly, it shows us that justice is not always about punishment. Sometimes it's about rewriting the rules so the next person gets a fair chance. So if you ever find yourself in a seat someone tells you that you don't deserve, pause, breathe, and remember this. The real power lies not in the seat itself, but in how you choose to claim it. If this story moved you, if you believe that dignity, justice, and quiet strength can change entire systems, then we invite you to stay with us. At X Daily Stories, we don't just tell stories. We uncover the power behind calm resistance, the strength of standing your ground, and the moments where one voice shifts the course of everything. Each day we bring you real, thought-provoking stories that challenge prejudice, uplift courage, and remind us all that change doesn't always shout. It often starts in silence. Subscribe now to X Daily Stories and never miss a story that matters. Share this video with someone who needs to be reminded. You don't need permission to take your rightful seat. Let us know in the comments, where are you watching from, and what does justice mean to you? Because sometimes the most powerful stories are the ones that almost went unnoticed.